I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for today, William Rouse. He's the General Manager of Los Angeles Yellow Cab and the leading voice of the taxi industry here in Southern California and around the U.S. His fleet of 1,200 vehicles is the largest cooperatively owned taxi company in the western United States. The General Manager of Los Angeles Yellow Cab, he oversees a total of 5 fleets serving 6 million passengers a year. The company's 5 taxi cab fleets of Greater Los Angeles include Yellow Cab of Los Angeles, Long Beach Yellow Cab, United Checker Cab, South Bay Yellow Cab, and Fiesta Taxi. Mr. Rouse is also affiliated with the management of the San Diego Yellow Cab with 330 vehicles in service, California Yellow Cab in Orange County with over 200 vehicles and the largest taxi cab fleets in Nashville, Tennessee, and Charlotte, North Carolina. He's here to speak to us today about understanding the past, present, and future of the taxi industry in Los Angeles. Please join me in welcoming to UCLA, William Rouse.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Taylor. I am very excited to be here. You won't be surprised that given who I am that I can hardly get through a cocktail hour without somebody stopping me and wanting to find out how Uber's impacting my business. In fact, I think from now on I'm going to probably like pre-drink ahead of my cocktail hours. But anyway, so I do end up talking about this a lot, although I've never talked in a setting like this before. I have, however, had the pleasure of hosting the last 2 years of classes for the of Coro Fellows. Are you all familiar with Coro of Southern California? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. It's a public policy fellowship for 9 months, and they pick about 12 or so really bright people and take them through an entire course of exposure to government and labor and business and other sectors that I'm not remembering, but nonprofit. And so they like to make a stop at my office because we, in the cab industry, we happen to be what I call the reluctant participants of one of the great business policy discussions of our day. So, and I enjoy those discussions. Let me walk you through my outline here. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. Then I'm going to talk to you about the ownership structure of the taxi industry in Los Angeles. Then we'll move on to the regulatory structure of ground transportation. Talk to you about some public policy considerations that underlie taxi regulations. Talk to you about the CPUC rulemaking process that created the TNCs, and maybe you guys have already discussed that, but I'm gonna give you our take on it. We were very active participants in the process. Then talk to you about some of the advantages that TNCs have, some that are not created by regulation and really it has nothing to do with policy, and then some that are actually created by regulation. Because one of the things that I want to do today with you is talk about, you know, this is the taxi rule book, my one and only prop for the day. This is the taxi rule book for the city of Los Angeles, pages and pages and pages of rules. And I can tell you that to the regulator downtown, there is either an incident or some other good reason why we have each and every one of these rules in here. And I can tell you that what the TNCs are looking at is nothing like this. And so I ask our policymakers, like, is this still relevant anymore? And if it is still relevant, then why aren't we looking at leveling the playing field in that way? And if it is not still relevant, then why aren't we looking at leveling the playing field in that way? And so that's sort of the mindset that I come to you with. I acknowledge my bias right out at the outset. I care very much about the co-ops. I care very much about the owners, the individual owners, and I'm going to explain our structure and the impact that they've had. They're very real impacts on their family's wealth. And so this is, you might say it's a little too personal to me. I'll try not to make it look too personal to me, but I'll guarantee you it is personal to me. So anyway, then we'll talk a little more about the current efforts that we've had to level the playing field, and I forgot a bullet point in there. I do have a note about the future, a slide about the future. So we'll go ahead and get into this. So introduction, a big blank slide there for you. So as Professor Taylor said, I manage 5 taxi cab fleets in the greater Los Angeles area. They range in size from LA's smallest fleet of 75 vehicles to LA's largest fleet, Yellow Cab of Los Angeles, with 800 vehicles. Before they became cooperatives, they sort of grew out of my family's business. I'm the 4th generation of my family in the taxi cab business. Next year will be our 80th year, or our 80-year anniversary of our founding. When my father took over our business in 1977, we had only 23 cabs. Professor Taylor walked you through the various regions of the country where we manage taxi cabs. All in all, I don't know how many it is. It's probably about 2,500 or so, but with the majority being under my management here in Los Angeles. My father is just, so you know where I'm coming from, Mitch Rouse. He's the founder of Super Shuttle. Super Shuttle was a pioneer, really, in the concept of shared transportation, and really came to define an entire industry and operates in many cities and actually many countries. That company was sold by our family in 2005 or 6, and so we're not affiliated with that company by way of ownership anymore. I am also the immediate past president of TPAC, our statewide Taxi Cab Industry Association. I've served for 3 years as president of TPAC, the Taxi Cab Paratransit Association of California, and I am also a past president of the TLPA, our industry's Washington, D.C. based. It's really somewhat international, but it's primarily American trade association, and that's the Taxi Cab Limousine and Paratransit Association. I had the dubious honor of being the president when the issue of the TNCs really began to hit our industry. In the process of my presidency, had I been 2 years earlier, it would have been about wine tastings, but my year, it was about 300 media appearances and really starting to develop an understanding of what was happening to us, frankly, in terms of the business models, the 2 competing business models, as well as starting to articulate a public policy agenda, and we were way, way behind. There were a lot of resources that were directed at us, and we had a lot of work to do. So that's who I am. By the way, I'm also a lawyer, and so hope that doesn't scare you off. But okay, so the ownership structure of the local taxi industry. In Los Angeles, we have a franchise system of regulation. Have you guys gone over stuff like this in the past?
Some, yes.
Okay, so there's 3 basic permitting systems for taxi cabs, really across the country. One is a permit system, which is just more or less like a business license. You you apply for it. There's not usually a lot of restrictions on it, maybe an approval process by a commission somewhere, and then you renew it annually, and it's not a very complicated process. It typically is a full cost recovery process, however the city defines that, but they're not really supposed to be making money off the permit system. That actually is the majority of cities. The majority of cities actually don't have something to trade in terms of rights to operate and that have a ton of value, so cities just do permit systems. The second regulatory system that you might have is a medallion system, and there's really only one city in California that has a medallion system, and that's San Francisco. So what happens in a medallion system is a city, the government, issues an individual vehicle operating right. And those operating rights will have any number of types of rules attached to them. So if you're in New York City and you get a medallion, you're not supposed to take dispatch trips. If you're in some cities and you have a medallion, even though you have a vehicle operating right, you might have to affiliate with a cab company so that you're not an individual one-off. But in any event, there's a couple critical things about medallions that are important to know. Number one, they're in perpetuity, And number two, they confer a property right. And when we say they confer a property right, what that means is they have all the constitutional guarantees of due process, and you can't deny somebody their property without due process. So that's an important thing to know, because our bundle of rights, which is in a franchise, which is the third method, doesn't have all that in it. And I'm going to take a little sip of water. I'm going to do that Marco Rubio thing there. Okay. So our system is a franchise system, and a franchise really is just, for all intents and purposes, just a contract. And like most contracts, it has a start date and an end date. And then in the contract and in things like this, there's lots and lots of terms and conditions. And when those contracts come up for renewal, then the city looks at it and decides whether it wants to change the terms, add new terms. One term that was added in 2010 was the requirement that we green our taxi fleets, something that I would argue would have happened anyway just due to the economics, but we did not oppose it, and it was an absolute blessing to the industry. There was no reason to oppose it, but that's the idea of something that a city might decide that they want to do with their taxi fleet. And so we have a contract, and that's a franchise, and the current franchises, I think, are set to end around, actually I don't even know. They were set to end in 2017, but I think they may have gotten extended. But we'll work on that when I get back to the office. Okay. So in LA, though, interestingly, all the franchises are actually membership organizations. And what I mean by a membership organization is you own a slot of some sort, mostly shares of stock, and that share of stock corresponds to the right to operate one vehicle. So if you want to operate a yellow cab and you want to be in the business of either driving your yellow cab or leasing your yellow cab to another driver, or a combination of that, then what you would do is buy a share of stock in our organization, and that would give you that operating right. There are 9 franchise cab companies in the city of LA. There are a couple that are organized under the California Corporations Code as associations. There are several that are organized as co-ops. There's almost zero functional difference between those two. And then there's one that's organized as an LLC, which is slightly different. But in essence, you buy a slot, you're in business. And so what does that look like? That looks a lot like medallions, right? We buy an individual operating right. We're now in the cab business. And so, so that's the way we operate. But there are you wanting to ask a question? Am I taking questions?
I think you can take questions of clarification, yeah.
Sure.
Discussion questions at the end, clarification questions now.
Yeah. I have no problem with questions.
I was going to ask, what is the cost of these stocks?
That's a great question, because in 2013, yellow cabs shares were selling for about $147. Today, you could probably buy one for about $15,000. And the share of stock is a function of two things, right? It's a function of, it's sort of like your net present value of your income stream, how much money can you make off of it, but it's also a function of how safe does an investor feel in taking money out of their pocket and buying one. And I could tell you that for many years, our stock value was declining, even though our shareholders were still making decent money. And I can point to another situation where for years in Chicago, where they have set medallion values and set leases and all sorts of things. So it was very public knowledge how much an owner of a taxi cab could make by holding a medallion in Chicago. Our medallions were earning our owners approximately double what a Chicago medallion earned a medallion holder, but yet we, with our franchises and all this other stuff that people can't quite get their hands around, our share price was trading at about half of what Chicago's was. But yes, prices are very depressed. People don't feel like it's safe to invest in the cab industry right now, and that's because we don't have a sense of sort of what people say where the bottom is, or where and if there is a floor, and so that's why we're seeing that. Okay. The organization is entirely democratic. Everybody who owns a share of stock, so unlike a medallion system, everybody who owns a share of stock actually has voting say-so in the organization. I you know, I look very corporate and I'm an attorney and I'm articulate, but guess what? I don't control these companies. I go to the board, I make proposals to the board. If they agree with me, then we do it. If they don't agree with me, then I do what they say. And so we're a very, very large driver-owned organization. We have very good leadership, myself included, because they know that we're leading them in the right direction. But we are democratic. And the workers control the companies, as I just said. But what you get out of that is you typically get very low turnover, and you also get people who really care about their investment and they want to build the business. And so that's an advantage there. So the regulatory structure of ground transportation, this is probably something that you have explored, but this is going to be me talking from my perspective. So under state law in California, we do not have a deregulated taxi industry. There's a government code section that mandates that every city and county regulate taxi cabs. Counties regulate over unincorporated areas. Cities obviously regulate over the incorporated areas. And so a major issue that we have today is that the TNCs are regulated by one entity, and that's the California PUC, and we're regulated by 400 entities. And I would submit to you respectfully that if you're going to tell me that I got to go get reforms one after another in 400 separate jurisdictions, I'm going to tell you that that's actually an impossibility and it ain't going to happen. So that's one of the primary issues that we're dealing with today. Charter carriers, along with really all transportation in California, because the California Constitution says that transportation is regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission, and then there's a PUC code section that itemizes some exceptions, and one of those exceptions is taxi cabs. But charter carriers, for the purposes of this conversation, are regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission, the PUC. The critical distinction there is pre-arrangement. Taxi cabs, we don't have a requirement of pre-arrangement or non-pre-arrangement. Taxis operate on a pre-arranged basis, obviously. Hi, I'm going to the airport tomorrow. Can you pick me up at 7:30? Yes, okay, that's pre-arranged. Or we operate on non-pre-arranged. You're standing on the corner, you hail the taxi, the taxi stops and you're on your way. That's non-pre-arranged. Taxis may do both. Charter carriers may operate only on pre-arrangement only. And then I have this quote here, which I confess is not exact word to word, but I guarantee you it is so close to word for word. Okay, because I memorized it. But what this comes out of is the Public Utilities Commission in the 80s and early 90s had some enforcement actions against limo and sedan operators that were functionally acting as taxi cabs. And so somebody would call up and say, hey, Joe, I'm over here at the Luskin School, can you pick me up? And the PUC enforced against those limos and sedans, saying that that does not constitute prearrangement. And this issue with what is prearrangement and what is not prearrangement has been a battleground for years. And many taxi regulators in particular wanted a really bright line. And they wanted to say prearrangement constitutes a minimum number of minutes, let's say 30 minutes or something like that, because there were not only the regulatory gray areas, but there were also enforcement gray areas too. And the Commission steadfastly, over decades literally, refused to define prearrangement in terms of minutes. But when limos and sedans were acting like taxi cabs and taking an immediate order out of a cell phone, the Commission slapped those folks down and said emphatically this Commission has no jurisdiction over on-demand point-to-point intracity ground transportation. So think about what the TNCs do. On-demand point-to-point intracity ground transportation. So this is the comparative structure. There are PUC regulated entities like passenger stage carriers that don't require prearrangement. This distinction is only relevant for this taxi TNC issue.
Would that be all intercity, the stage?
Intracity?
Intercity.
No, a passenger stage carrier, similar, Super Shuttle's a passenger stage carrier, right? They stage vehicles at a curb at the airport, and you can board and you can go where you want. Doesn't require prearrangement. So they do have non-prearranged categories. Okay, So the public policy considerations underlying taxi regulations. At the center of it, in my view, it's the concept of market failure. That if we had a perfect market with everyone having perfect information, that maybe there wouldn't be the need for so much of this regulation. But taxi regulation proceeds under the assumption that the market isn't perfect, and I think, in essence, they're right. If you look at the most recent city in the area to regulate taxi cabs, that would be Santa Monica. They were completely deregulated as to supply and completely deregulated as to price. So you're standing there, on 4th Street, and you've gotten done with your dinner, and you want to hail a cab, and there's 3 cabs coming, and you had no idea what that cab was going to charge. And so this first cab could be a $2.50 a mile. That one could be $5 a mile when the city graphed it all out. The city of Los Angeles licensed vehicles were, of course, the lowest priced vehicles, and everybody else was somewhere north of that. And so that consumer hailing a cab doesn't have the ability to make an educated decision. They also don't know about issues of service quality. They don't know issues of background checks. They don't really know anything. They're just taking the next cab, and that's one of the reasons why cities have seen fit to regulate taxis. So there's other issues, of course, safety and quality. Again, this sort of concept here that like every rule is backed by an incident or backed by some sort of reason. So we have background checks, vehicle inspections, all sorts of stuff that we go through, examination of driver records by the city, all the sort of things that government does, not the cab company necessarily. This is really, in my mind, about what is the proper role of government, right? And so, and then there's issues of service quality. So we've had examples of taxi cabs in the past providing terrible service quality and vehicle condition and poorly maintained seats and all sorts of things that have brought about these rules. And so that those things have, again, they brought about the rules. On issues of supply and pricing, and maybe you guys have discussed this in the past, in the post-Depression and World War II years, you had mostly taxi cab deregulation, particularly during the Depression, and people would take their cars out and start to transport passengers. And almost universally, cities got clogged by people who were just really trolling for fares. And I have some friends who are from Tehran, and basically they say, well, that's exactly what we have in Tehran all the time, right? You just sort of take your car out and take people and charge them what you want. And so out of that came a nearly universal belief that it was proper to control the supply of taxi cabs and to regulate the supply of taxi cabs. And in fact, what we've seen over and over since then, cities like Indianapolis, Seattle, Sacramento, cities that experimented with deregulation ultimately went back to regulating because they also found that there were problems with having an unlimited supply of vehicles. The same goes for pricing. So as I gave the Santa Monica example as the classic example. The city of Santa Monica has an interest in their transit-dependent individuals, their citizens at large, their tourist community, etc. All sorts of constituents that they feel like they should protect by having a predictable fare in the taxi cabs. And so cities set pricing, and taxi cab meters are set to charge only that price, and then we have, again, another government entity coming in that weights and measures to calibrate those meters and make sure those are okay and seal them, etc. And then there's some other considerations, kind of things that I've already touched on. Central to this is a belief that regulators are going to do it better than business, and that's a belief that I think is being challenged today. But that is certainly a presumption. And then overarching all of this is a concept of balance. And balance is important for a couple of things. Because when you look at supply and pricing, for instance, one of the issues of balance that cities take into consideration is not whether you're going to get a cab. It's not how much money me, the shareholder, is going to make. It's about the driver. And so cities have said, well, we don't want to have too many cabs because we want drivers to earn a livable wage or a decent living. And so the concept of balance is an important one, because what it means is, to me, is we're leaving people on the curb sometimes, right? We have a supply and demand curve that kind of goes like this, or a demand curve that goes like this. We have a supply that's fixed, and we're not going to meet the peaks. And what the peaks mean is tough cookies. I guess you've got to find another way home. And so that's what we in our industry have been living with for so many years. And I can tell you in San Francisco, obviously the birthplace of TNCs, they grew that city's fleet by so few cabs. Well, LA's only grown by, you guys might be shocked, about 60 vehicles since the year 2000. And look at the demographic change. Look at all the building that's going on downtown and in Hollywood. Look at the density that we've seen. Look at all the pointers that would suggest, including obviously the rise of Uber and Lyft, not coincidentally, right, that would point to the fact that the city totally miscalculated on demand. And the same goes for San Francisco, the same goes for cities everywhere. But there's this concept of balance, and the concept of balance means we got a lot of things that we care about, and only one of them is the well-being of the passenger. Sometimes we care more about whether the driver's earning a decent living. And so those things are getting challenged today as well. So let me talk to you about the PUC, the TNC rulemaking process. Started in December 2012. I have enough friends, in this first bullet point, I have enough friends in the PUC, and they have acknowledged to me that absolutely, even though they presented the question as whether to assert jurisdictions, their marching orders were to assert jurisdiction. And the only reason I gripe about that is because we spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers arguing a question that really wasn't in front of them. And it would have been better if we had focused our efforts on the questions that really, well, they said they cared about. We're not even sure if they cared about those. But anyway, so they intended to assert jurisdiction all along. There's a story that goes that they went to LA and San Francisco and said, you know, what the heck are we going to do with these TNCs? And the people at LA and San Francisco who have not acknowledged these conversations said, we don't know what to do with them, you take them. Okay, so in September 2013, the decision's issued. We create a new category called the TNCs, a mobile-enabled platform that connects passengers with drivers of their personal cars. The TNC activity constitutes prearrangement. One bullet point I forgot in here is they expressly reject the concept that TNCs are mere technology companies. They basically say that, you know, you're a transportation company. Okay, and that brings them within their jurisdiction. But TNC activity does constitute prearrangement. So again, as of the date of this decision, if you took a phone call in a sedan from somebody who said, please pick me up here at the Luskin School, that's illegal. But if you took an app order from the same person to the same car, then that was legal. One constitutes prearrangement, one doesn't constitute prearrangement, and there is the rub on the cab industry right there. Okay, no price regulation, no fleet size regulation, and the insurance issues were to be sorted out later. We were crying about insurance a lot because we are mandated to have 24/7 insurance, and insurance is 1/3 of our cost structure, and so we cried about that one. Okay, but that one got worked out the following year. Still not level playing field there on insurance, but somewhat. Okay. So now I want to talk to you about what we see are the sort of advantages that they have in the marketplace, some of which are not created by regulation, that's these, and then some of which we think are created by regulation. So one is they are and have been the shiny new object. We're just old taxi and students. Like I'm talking to students, right? I mean, you guys, you're worse than anybody at being attracted to the shiny new object. And so anyway, everyone's attracted to the shiny new object. It took my father to sit down with me and like, look, Stop focusing on the student's bill. My friends are using Uber. So anyway, but they are the shiny new object. Obviously, the thing that everybody likes to talk about, valuations and their funding rounds, billions and billions of dollars. We work on a $20 cab ride. That's what we work, right? So when you talk about a funding round of $2 billion, you're in fantasy land, funny money territory for us. I mean, our just complete disclosure, our annual budget for 1,300 taxi cabs, which is cost side only, it's not revenue side. I can explain that later, but it's co-op. It's about $22 million. So when they talk about a funding round of billions of dollars, it's literally meaningless to us. But what it means is they can buy and give away trips and keep giving away trips. I heard somebody say, unsourced, don't know if it's true, that Lyft spends 60% of its revenue on marketing. Our co-op owners just don't have the means to do that, and that's just not going to happen, right? Okay, and now next we get to the thing that everybody likes to talk about, which is the taxi image and experience. And in the old days, taxis were viewed as a utility, right? If you walked in this room and you flipped on the light, you didn't go, yes, right? The lights went on. But if the lights don't go on, you're like, we have a problem here, and so people looked at taxis like that too. They basically said, if you got a good ride, you might, if you had that special driver who's really personable, you might be impressed. But generally, it's just utilitarian thing. And today, what we have is, an end-to-end experience that's created by these apps, and it's a better product, right? But today, we have people's experience. Everyone's had a bad experience with taxi cab. Another part of my conversation, my cocktail conversation that I get is people who have bad experiences in their taxi cabs. So I reach for another drink. Anyway, leaders harmed by poor performers. I find as the president of the TLPA, past president of TLPA, that we have a lot of high-quality performers. And I can give you a metric that will show that taxis are not fungible even in LA. So from the end of 2006 to the end of 2012, the city of Los Angeles, the overall taxi cab trip volume grew by 600,000 trips per year. My company, Yellow Cab, grew by 660,000 trips over that same time period. So not only did we have 100% of the city's growth, we also took market share at a time when the taxi industry was booming. So if you're going to tell me that all taxis are the same, I'm going to throw that stat back at you, and I'm going to say no. And how do we do it? We were the first with the backseat credit card devices. We were the first with an app. The Taxi Magic app at the time, we were doing, we were doing 2,200 trips a day. So we were doing a lot, fully 30% of our order business, not the street hail business, was done by way of app. So the next cocktail question I got, why doesn't the taxi industry have an app? Please. Okay. So slowness to adapt, fragmentation in the industry, these kind of go together. Our industry is completely fragmented, and there's just a lot of bad blood between competitors. We don't work well together. And even 5 years into this, we still don't work well together. It's very, very difficult to get an industry on the same page as to the major change that's really confronting them. Now, some regulatory disadvantages, some of which I've already touched on. Dynamic pricing, pricing flexibility. So we all know about the surge, and we all know, I forgot what Lyft calls theirs, but whatever. What are they doing there? They are getting that, that demand curve to flatten out, and they're getting the supply curve to look more wiggly than our fixed supply curve, and they're trying to match supply and demand. That's the obvious side of it. But what the business side of it is, they're going after reliability. If you call my company, I will tell you quite honestly, you have a 9 in 10 chance of getting a cab. Why are we only able to serve 9 out of 10 orders? Because there is a mismatch in the supply of vehicles and the demand for the vehicles. They are able to get what we call, my friends call, a no doubt ride by playing with the economics of the business. and that gives them a competitive advantage, something that taxis are totally disabled from doing. Violation of law, cart us off to jail. Okay, absence of city boundaries, very, very critical for two reasons. Number one, I don't know if you hear all this advertising for drivers. Uber's advertising for drivers more than they're advertising for passengers. Lyft's advertising for drivers more than they're advertising for passengers. And in fact, they're right. The competition for drivers is the more important side of the equation. And we're doing our best to hold on to our drivers, because if we don't have drivers, our cabs are parked, and if you call for a cab, you'll never get transportation. That's just the way it is. If they have more and more drivers, then they can deliver this reliability. This absence of city boundaries is critical to the driver equation, because my driver in Santa Monica might only have a Santa Monica permit. So he leaves Santa Monica and he takes the party goers to Hollywood, and what does he have to do? He has to deadhead back to Santa Monica. And we all know what that's like on a Friday, Saturday night. He's going 45 minutes, an hour potentially, with zero compensation, right? And so at the end of his work day, how much did he earn, right? Whereas the Uber driver drops in, takes from Santa Monica, drops in Hollywood, picks up somebody 2 blocks later. That trip may take him 3 blocks, or it may take him to Irvine. Who knows? But when he gets to Irvine, he's picking up real close there, right? There's no cab companies anywhere that have permits across those boundaries that I just described. Yes, there are some across LA and Santa Monica, but so those dead miles kill us in our competition for drivers. And those dead miles, remember that state law that says every city must regulate taxi cabs? Well, that's part of what's hurting us. Next, scale, fleet size. Again, we talked about the more drivers you have, the faster your service time, the higher your reliability is. We talked about the fact that the city of Los Angeles has only increased about 60 cabs in 16 years, right? How are we supposed to compete when we're completely locked down? And I will tell you that my company, the non-different, or the able to be differentiated cab company, right? We propose to lift those limits off the vehicles, and the competition doesn't want yellow cab unchained, and so we get to that fractured and all those competitive issues. But on the issue of scale, so you get service times, obviously, more vehicles, faster service, and trip density on the driver's side is that same idea where you have less and less dead miles, higher and higher paid miles means higher efficiency, means actually then Uber can turn around and drop the prices again. The issue of insurance. We're still 24/7 insurance, 30% of our cost structure. They are not required to have a dispatch center. It's written in the book. We're required to have a dispatch center. I can tell you 30% of the cost structure is insurance, another 30% is dispatch. Those two items right there are killing us. Other regulatory, franchise fees. This used to say greedy, but anyway, the city of Santa Monica charges $2,000 per cab per year. I will tell you the question that I know you're going to ask me: how much has Uber impacted the cab industry? In Santa Monica, we've just been obliterated. I would say we're probably down 80 to 85%. City has not budged one nickel on franchise fees. Is the cab industry looking at possibly pulling out of Santa Monica? I mean, at some point, it's not sustainable the way it is. But we have various cities around that are really charging exorbitant franchise fees. I don't even include Los Angeles in here, because if you can believe it, Los Angeles, including LAX, is actually cheaper than all of those. So go figure. All right, airport fees. This actually is a hangover from my old slide. Uber is in fact paying airport fees, and they pay quite a bit of airport fees, so I'll just delete that one out. But the driver screening, the governmental driver screening, we have largely cracked the nut of how to recruit for drivers using paid search, Google search, and the like. We get inquiries all the time. Drivers will not sign up to go through a multi-week process and pay $300 for a background check and a driver permit. So that's what we're looking at. So these governmental imposed driver screening, drug testing, then no permanent markings on the vehicles. We have to have permanent markings on the vehicles. How many of you would want to drive for yellow cab if I told you you have to paint your vehicle our yellow, you have to put our stickers all over your vehicle, you have to put a meter in the vehicle, we're going to drill into your car. Obviously, nobody would do that, right? Vehicle inspections, all the TNCs have to do is put a list of promises that comply with the rules, and then after that the PUC doesn't engage in any regulation after that. We have multiple vehicle inspections every year by governmental entities. Wheelchair service, this is a huge problem. This is a huge public policy problem because there is no successful wheelchair service unless there is subsidies for it. And the way the system has worked in Los Angeles is there's been enough money in the system for the cab companies themselves, and there's been enough value in those shares, right? So if I go to somebody who's holding a $150,000 share and I say, guess what, you got to kick in and pay for some wheelchair service, they don't have a choice. But when the share value is down to zero, then how much leverage do I have anymore? And that is a major issue for us. And then no accountability to the city. That I can't begin to describe the regulatory headache that we go through in just dealing with cities. So efforts to level the playing field. So in February 2016, I'm surprised that I'm going this long, but I think I'm still going to end on time. We had gone twice to the state with legislation that we thought was reasonable, including fingerprint background checks on TNC drivers, things that we thought would help level the playing field, and we got rejected by the legislature. And so in February 2016, there was a joint hearing by the California Senate Transportation Committee and the Senate Utilities, UNC. Why am I blanking on this one? EUNC, Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee. And so they held a joint committee, and there the message to the cab industry was crystal clear. Yes, there's an unlevel playing field. Yes, we, the state, created it. Yes, we would like to address it this year. But no, if it takes the form of additional rules on the TNCs, don't even bother. So what we did is we came back to them with the original vision for AB 650, which was to move taxi regulation to the state. This was revolutionary, but not unprecedented. Colorado has taxi regulation at the state. Pennsylvania has taxi regulation at the state, and so not totally unprecedented. And because we felt like to get rationality between the between the rules, where we weren't proposing to combine the two categories, but we were proposing to say, look, sometimes the two categories are similar, so let's have similar regulations, and sometimes the two categories are different, and let's have different regulations. And we thought we would never get rationality in the regulations until we moved the TNC regulation to the state. And then we proposed a number of changes that would make taxi regulation look a lot more like TNC regulation. More pricing flexibility. We were agreeable to a statewide maximum, but the unlimited right to discount our pricing. Today, in most cities, discounting is just as illegal as overcharging. And so the problem that we ran up against was the PUC reorganization. There was a bill introduced by Mike Gatto, the chair of Assembly Energy Utilities Communications, and Mike actually is an old friend of mine, but guess what? He went on the record as saying transportation doesn't belong in the PUC, and our bill was dead if it even mentioned taxis going to the PUC. So we got into August, and the bill was going nowhere, and we decided to do a slimmed-down version with Assemblymember Gatto's blessing that would have intent language to move taxi regulation to the state once the reorganization of the PUC is done. Significant but not sweeping regulatory reforms. Yes, we get a little bit of pricing flexibility. We get the right to take a licensed taxi cab and pick up across city boundaries. A few other things vetoed by the governor with the message that the reforms were too sweeping. We didn't see anything sweeping in there except this intent language, and my belief, we haven't sat down with the governor's office yet, my belief is that it's that intent language that says we're taking all taxi regulation from the cities and moving it to the state. That's what got the bill hung up, but it is hung up. So here's here's just some future talk. I was at the Taxi Regulators Conference in September, and there was a very interesting presentation by the CFO of Get. Are you guys familiar with Get? Get is an Israeli company. It's the largest taxi cab dispatch app in Germany. And he was talking about the future, and well, he talked about a lot, but one section was this idea of the future and these two visions. And one is where the car manufacturers win. And so from the car manufacturer's perspective, Mercedes says Uber has a valuation of 60 billion, and we have a valuation of 85 billion, but we're Mercedes with all this, everything that we have. Like, it's nonsense that they should be valued at 80, and they say all they have is an app, which is a little dismissive, and we can just build the app into the car and render Uber irrelevant. And so that's the car manufacturers win, Uber doesn't matter scenario. The other scenario is what you see on Uber today, which is I dial up my, and I order a luxury sedan, and I don't know if it's a Hyundai Genesis or a Lincoln or a Cadillac or a Mercedes, and frankly, as the customer, I don't even give a hoot, right? And so if Uber wins, the car manufacturers see their ever diminishing value in their own brand. And so to us, we see this as the coming clash of the titans. There's also another, by the way, another vision in there, which is, of course, the public sector, because there's going to be a drain off traditional modes in the public sector, and so what role they're going to be playing in autonomous vehicles is not clear. So we're still struggling. We in taxi, we're still struggling with the concept of, like, is there even room there? And I would submit to you that if the taxi industry could overcome the fragmentation issues and could get together, I think there's sufficient market share there to start to talk about taxi making an impact there. And discussions like that are going on. Where they're going to go, I don't know. But the last point here, massive business change, the business model change needs to take place. Their transactional business model, our business model involves the lease of that taxi cab operating right on a weekly basis. Drivers just aren't buying weekly leases anymore. So we have to find a way to get a little piece off each trip, just like the TNCs do. And so that's it. I hope that was helpful. I hope you enjoyed that, or at least that's what the doctor ordered, and I am open for questions. Yes.
One time I was in DC and I took a Uber taxi, which I don't know if they still operate it, but it's basically the Uber.
Yeah.
I guess it's like a dispatch method. What do you think of those?
Well, yeah. Oh, so the question is, the questioner asked about Uber taxi. He said he had taken an Uber taxi in Washington, D.C., and what do I think about Uber taxi? Tactically, Uber is I'm just going to say it. This has been heavy on my opinion, and so I'll keep going with that. But tactically, they are of questionable ethics, because we've seen examples again and again where they come into a taxi market with Uber taxi. As at the first time the customer says they're mildly dissatisfied, they send out a promo code and say, look, we understand you're disappointed in taxi. We're disappointed in taxi too, and so why don't you switch over to the UberX thing, and here's your promo code to do it. So to me, if it wasn't for some questionable activities, I would not have so much of a problem with it. But what I can tell you about Uber taxi is that I don't know how it's doing in DC, because DC is a market that is so overwhelmingly street hail that even DC Yellow, which has always been the sort of phone order company, rarely responds to their orders. I mean, DC is a street hail city. If you go to Chicago, which is also overwhelmingly a street hail city, but you have one very high quality operator, Flash Cab, that is one of the according to the people I know who've seen statistics, one of the highest completion rates, or the highest rate of getting a cab to you when you order it. But if you look at Chicago, Uber is actually the #1 dispatcher of taxi cabs in Chicago, and more than any other cab company there, including Yellow of Chicago, which has like 2,000 vehicles. So they dispatch more trips. What does that say to me? It says that maybe, just maybe, there's room for taxi alongside the TNCs. And maybe there's a customer out there that values what we're offering, you know, fingerprint-based background checks, whatever our value proposition is at that time, right? And that maybe because for some reason that consumer is looking at the choice and they're not choosing the TNCs. Other people might know why that is, but we're looking at that as you know, a glimmer of hope. Any other questions? Yes, and then.
I have a couple of questions. The first one was when you were talking about the drivers, and they do have like a connection to the taxi industry and just like feeling loyalty to them. But just like reading and seeing how they're switching over to like Uber and Lyft and becoming drivers for them. What do you think is really like attracting them besides the, I guess the huge regulations and the high costs of having a taxi? Because I know at one point they end up getting distracted with how like it's like a shiny thing, like they want to do it, but at one point I feel like a lot of drivers end up finding out that it's not as, I guess, successful to them like as they thought it would be. And then my other question is,
can I take one at a time, just for my own brain? All right. So the question is, what about these taxi drivers who are switching from the taxi industry to Uber and Lyft, and why is that happening? And then you brought up the fact that some taxi drivers find that it's not a successful choice for them. It's my firm belief that this has not been about a revenue issue to the drivers. I can show you math that shows that our drivers still make a decent living. I can also tell you anecdotally that the drivers are telling us it's not merely a revenue thing to the drivers. Our drivers face so much red tape when it comes to license renewals, harassment from LAX airport police, harassment from what they perceive to be, I'm going to talk, perceived harassment from LADOT. We've had some drivers come back to us and say, yes, of course I make less money, but I don't have to deal with LADOT. I think that is an important issue for the seasoned drivers who've left us, who had the book of business, who walked away from a book of business. Those are the most important issues. I don't think it's really about our business model and the fact that we really need to figure out how to get away from the weekly lease model that we have. But for the drivers who are maybe the newer drivers, it's all about the freedom to drive when they want, where they want. It's about not having a weekly nut in the form of that lease and the pressure that the lease creates, much like, you know, I came out of law school, right? Student loans. Guess what? Student loans end up dictating your career choice, right? Because it's a nut that you have to cover, right? And so if that it's the same concept, not as big a scale, thankfully, but you know, if somebody has to pay $600 a week to an owner, then, and in the other system they have literally no lease, no commitment, no anything, right? So today's a really nice day. It's 90 degrees in October, and I haven't been to the beach since June, so I'm going to the beach, right? And our drivers don't feel like they can really have that freedom. And so it's the issue of the freedom, it's the issue of the regulatory burden. But I can tell you that in large part it is not a revenue issue. We can find revenue for the drivers. We have a really nice amount of contract work that gets them revenue. So what's your second question?
The second one is about like regulation. And do you think like government is the real roadblock? Or do you think it's because TNCs are just moving so fast that by the time something does get passed or it's like on its way, they're already doing something that you need to like catch up to? Or,
well, it's both. The taxi industry's inability to get along with itself is part of the problem. It's the TNC's massive amount of funding and frankly mind-boggling amounts that they spend on lobbying. I mean, they overwhelm us with lobbying. But it's also their business model and their ability to get that no doubt ride and their ability to access a gigantic pool of drivers that allows them to, frankly, discard all the drivers that are causing them problems pretty fast. And we're in a situation where it's not easy for us to transition drivers in and out of our system. So, I mean, it is definitely, but the points that I raised up there, had those been addressed promptly, then those wouldn't be barriers, and then you would be standing there telling me that, Bill, it's all your fault now because they fixed all that, right? But today, those are definitely barriers. If it's still illegal for me to discount a ride when Uber took the passenger from me by giving away a $50 promo code or a $25 promo code, and I can't give away a promo code to get the customer even back. Not that, I mean, putting aside all the quality issues and whatever, but if I can't even give away a promo code legally, then that's a regulatory impediment to us being able to compete. And, Green, yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned that.
And I didn't repeat that question, did I? Sorry. Shame on me.
Since taxis are part of the California PUC, you guys are a public utility, has there been any discussion on sort of putting yourself on the same level as like electricity and water and allowing for regulated monopolies in order to compete with the scale of Uber and Lyft?
Well, let me correct the premise of your question. So the question was, since taxis are, did you say we're at the Public Utilities Commission, or we function like did you mean to say that we function like a utility, and so has the concept of a regulated monopoly been proposed to allow us to compete with Uber and Lyft?
Right. So, I mean, maybe I misunderstood your interaction with the Public Utility Commission. I kind of perceived it as the taxi industry does count as or is considered a public utility.
It is unquestionably considered a public utility, but let me just go back to the slide here just to remind you here. So under the regulatory structure, under California state law and the government code, there's a section that requires every state and county to regulate taxis, and that includes regulating the entry and exit of taxi cab companies into the area. TNCs, sedans, limos, other charter carriers, they are regulated by the PUC. There's a section of the Public Utilities Code that exempts taxi cabs entirely from PUC regulation. So we are not regulated by the PUC. Getting to your question, because your question could be asked of cities as well, so it's not conditioned on that. No one has ever talked about that. In LA, that would be a monumentally difficult task, because what you have right now is you have a mostly driver-owned, an entirely driver-owned industry. And so what are you going to do? You're going to pick a winner, and you're going to say these owners and their families and their life savings, they're the winners, and then the others are not. And there's no initiative. You know, I've been telling the industry, I've been reminding them that look, you know, with our 800 vehicles, we couldn't solve the fleet size issue. And so you, cab company, friend cab company with 246 vehicles, and you, friend cab company with 170 vehicles, guess what? If I can't solve it with 800, you're not solving it with 170 vehicles. And so why are we not talking about, frankly, mergers and finding ways to achieve scale on our own? And it's the cab industry. So, here and then there.
I was wondering if you could talk more about AB 650 and why legislators are reluctant to open city boundaries.
So the question is about AB 650 and why legislators are reluctant to open city boundaries. In fact, I think AB 650 actually enjoyed a lot of support. I mean, we got it passed out of the Senate, and we got it passed out of the Assembly and onto the governor's desk. So The governor vetoed it, not the legislature. And the governor's veto message is this cryptic 3-sentence thing that basically says the reforms are too sweeping. Well, the only sweeping thing in there was that intent language that said, once the PUC reorganization is done, we're taking taxi cab. Otherwise, I don't think that veto message applies to that bill, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And so we're going to sit down. Actually, on my way in here, I was talking to our people in Sacramento, and we're getting ready to sit down with the governor's office to find out if we can get any clues. I will tell you that the governor, has a reputation for being just very unpredictable. And so among the people that I know who've been in Sacramento for a very long time, they think he's the most unpredictable governor when it comes to vetoes. So I will tell you that we worked with the governor's office the entire year. And if they had asked for every taxi cab in the state of California to be painted pink, we would have put it into the bill. They got whatever they wanted, and we still got vetoed. So I don't see a problem with the legislature with crossing city boundaries. We can point to other metropolitan areas where prearranged trips, licensed cabs can cross city boundaries for prearranged trips. So it's not sacrosanct, this idea that you can only have a taxi that's licensed in the jurisdiction at the origin of the trip, right? And so I don't think that was the deal killer. Okay, in the back.
How did the taxi industry attempted to integrate their services with public transit? Are there any partnerships with transit agencies or ways that they could be seen as the preferred alternative for those first mile, last mile trips to stations?
Yeah, good question. The question is, how is the taxi industry working with transit on, I guess, filling in service gaps in the transit network, and in particular, first last mile issue. So we have been, we've been working. You guys probably know this more than I. The MTA has this Office of something innovation that's extraordinary innovation. And we're extraordinarily innovative, so it's a perfect match made in heaven. Anyway, so we've been working with that office. Those conversations haven't gone really anywhere to date, although we're still working on it. They actually need a solution that is designed specific station to station. A one regional solution they don't actually believe is going to work. So they would like us to really drill down, peel back the onion, and come up with a station-by-station solution, which I think sounds like a really interesting endeavor if my house wasn't burning down. And so, no, we're going to be. But we do actually have a first last mile project right now in Santa Monica that is called Blue at Night, and it's at the end of the the Expo line. And that one, we're there, the rides are subsidized, and the ridership is extremely low. And so we're set to sit down with the city to see if we can rectify that. But we are trying. So, yes?
So what do you think is better, removing regulations from taxis to even the playing field, or putting regulations on TNCs to even?
Well, our preferred future was to meet somewhere in the middle. We still believe emphatically in government-conducted fingerprint background checks. We don't think that privately conducted fingerprint background checks without any government oversight is really the best way to protect the public, for instance. And we think that there could be other areas that we see as impediments to us competing for drivers in that case, where regulations should be imposed on the TNCs for the betterment of the public. But in large part, the magnitude of the changes that we are facing would require us to really dismantle our regulatory structure. And I will tell you, I do believe that there's going to be a discussion locally in response to AB 650, because the cities are going to expect us to go back up and maybe get it done this year, right? And if they want to keep control, although they didn't care about keeping control when the TNCs were coming up. But if they want to keep control of taxi cabs, then we're going to have to sit down and have a dialogue about under what terms and conditions that's going to happen. And I do believe that dialogue is going to happen. So the answer is probably, the legislature, again, as I said before, told us emphatically, don't come back to us with additional regulations on the TNCs, and AB 650 was completely silent on the TNCs, not one mention of the TNCs. And so we basically capitulated and said, okay, well, fine, have it your way. We'll remove regulations off our industry. Again, our preferred future is somewhere in between. Did I repeat that question? The question was, what does the taxi industry prefer, to level the playing field by adding regulation to the TNCs or by reducing regulation to taxi cabs? Okay. In the back?
Yes. Can you speak a little bit more about the TNCs are doing a lot of lobbying? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, the question is about TNC lobbying and the amount of TNC lobbying. Everybody lobbies, so I'm not, we're a large consumer of lobbying services, and so I'm not hypocritical about lobbying. But what it means when you go against those resources, what it means is we go one office at a time, and they go 10 offices at a time or 15 offices at a time. And so I'm not criticizing that they have lobbyists. They would be irresponsible not to. But what I'm saying is the resources on their side compared to the resources on our side are just incredible. And if you look at the Secretary of State, I think maybe it's the FPPC, one of those two has the lobbying filings. You will see that actually in 2014, our total lobbying bill was $57,000, and theirs between Lyft, Uber, and Flywheel, not Flywheel, and Sidecar, thank you, at the time, was about 1.4 million. So we have 57,000 to 1.4 million, and all that is just hours, people hours. They're just buying a lot of people hours to do a lot of things in a lot of departments, and so we just can't match that. Yes.
I had a couple questions. One, it seems like Yellow Cab would really benefit from removing city boundaries for where you could pick up and drop off. Is that a general consensus among taxi companies, or some pushing back against that in order to protect their market?
So the question is that it seems like Yellow Cab would benefit from removing city boundaries, and whether that's a consensus among taxi companies or whether there's division. I mean, I think there's probably division on every issue, but I will tell you that all the cab companies that have this area of Los Angeles as their primary service area are also licensed in the city of West Hollywood. And we put pen to paper, all of us, and asked for the city of West Hollywood to sign a reciprocity agreement with LA, where they basically acknowledged each other's taxi cabs. So maybe there's hope. And so it looked like that paper on that day at that hour there was consensus, and there probably still is. But
and my second question is regarding the markets that TNCs and taxis cater to. So the people that use TNCs tend to be of a higher income. Do you see a future where TNCs and taxis kind of work side by side, just serving different markets?
So the question is about the different markets that TNCs and taxis serve, and you believe the TNC passengers' average income is higher than that of taxi, and whether the two industries can work side by side. Well, the ultimate question that you ask is exactly the issue that we're exploring, right? Where is the floor? My shareholders have asked about share value, right? Why do the shares keep falling? Well, the shares keep falling because nobody feels like we've found the bottom yet. And when we find the bottom and we feel like, yes, there is a world tomorrow where TNCs and taxis exist side by side, then you will see people have a comfort level with investing in our industry. But right, it's just like real estate. If there's more sellers than buyers, guess what? Your price is going down. So the answer is I don't know, because because we feel like there are some niches of business where there is a clear, where we still have an advantage in terms of our value proposition, but we would like that retail business back. I mean, today you will see on the street, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to my friends in the cab industry, you will see on the street much less taxi cabs than you ever used to see. Where are those taxi cabs? They're at home, they're parked, they're in the garage, their drivers are in bed. You know, they're watching the debate tonight, but they're not out on the street. And so what does that do? That means that we're in that sort of declining spiral right now where if you call and it takes me 30 minutes to get you a cab when it used to take me 10 minutes, right? Is the person sitting at that stand at the W over here, right? Where there was always taxi cabs. Maybe now, today, sometimes of the day, there are not taxi cabs. And how long is it going to take you to get that trip? Well, if we can't answer that question to your satisfaction, you're not going to use us the next time. So that's what we're looking at. Yes, in the back.
I'm speaking of taxi stands. I'm interested in how TNCs and taxis manage clustering of vehicles differently at high demand locations. So I'm curious as to, because I know that there's some taxi stands around where I live in West Hollywood and on the west side, but I haven't seen too many. I'm curious as to how that's managed differently in LA as to say in other cities where we have more, like New York, we have more taxi stands, walk-up stands.
So the question is about taxi stands and how they are managed. And give me the thrust of your question one more time.
How they manage, how they traditionally manage congestion at high demand locations.
Oh, okay. How they manage congestion in high-end locations. High demand locations. You know, one of the, I'm just going to say it, the whining, the aspects that you'll hear from the cab industry is how very few cities have ever viewed point-to-point on-demand transportation as even part of the transportation planning structure. New York being the obvious exception where they are a clear part of every aspect of planning. But for the most part in cities, and in particular with the city-by-city planning system, taxis have been looked at times as just a nuisance, at times as just a place to squeeze a few extra bucks out, but not really in terms of an analysis of transportation needs versus, you know, and how people are getting from place to place. And I'm talking about mostly small cities, but I'm even talking about in LA. There has not been a very enlightened view. So when you get to the issue of who sets up the taxi stands? The cities. And that's going to be the individual city. If you live in West Hollywood, I live in West Hollywood, that's going to be the West Hollywood Transportation Department, and they're going to set up the taxi stands. For years, we would go to the city of LA and say, look, if you want people to be on the street, and if you want taxi cabs to be more available, then you need to make it easier for people to take taxi cabs, right? LA had a transportation planning process that was about keeping lanes moving, all lanes moving, and so you had those rush hour lanes where they were vigorously enforced, which was the far right lane, right next to the curb, where you could never stop, and the cab industry complained about it all the time, but it was not the cab industry that won the battle, because the battle has been won. It was the downtown BID, the Business Improvement District, that basically said, look, you DOT, you've had a transportation planning mission since the 1940s of moving people into downtown in the morning and moving them out of downtown in the afternoon, and guess what? Our businesses don't want them leaving, and so the first thing that they went after were these rush hour lanes, which still exist in some places, and of course they did the Hail a Taxi program. And so how do cities manage it? I mean, ad hoc is what I would say. You know, for the most part, the taxi industry in the city of LA will go to the city and say, look, we need a stand at so-and-so. And they'll do an analysis, and we might get it and we might not. But I don't think there's a lot of communities that really do serious transportation planning with point-to-point on-demand ground transportation. I just don't think there's a lot of cities in maybe San Francisco does. I'm certain New York does, but not a whole lot. And New York's is like beyond sophisticated. I've been to presentations there. They are like, yeah, you should have them lecture. No, you were going to have Matt. Anyway, so.
If you were a legislator for a day, how would you change the regulations for TNCs and taxis?
Well, again, if I was a legislator for a day, how would I change the regulation for TNCs and taxis? No, I would not legislate them out of existence. That's the first thing that comes out of their mouth when they sit with a legislator. Like the taxi industry really has given an opportunity in our wildest dreams to legislate them out of business. It's like, they said that to you, really? Anyway, our focus has been on competitive disadvantages, the unlevel playing field, particularly those things that affect public safety. We have always felt that vehicles should be inspected. We've always felt that drivers should be background checked with fingerprints. We felt that those functions should not be performed by private entities, that they needed to be performed by some governmental actor somewhere or some delegated governmental actor. It could be somebody delegated, but you would see me proposing additional safeguards that are public safety related, and then you would see me proposing things like we proposed in AB 650, which is the ability to cross boundaries. The ability, another section of AB 650 was the ability to use smartphone technology as our taxi meters. Today, cities require us to still have a taxi meter, and the DFA, the Department of Food and Agriculture, which oversees Division of Weights and Measures, they have told us point blank they are fully prepared to certify smartphone taxi meters for taxi cabs, and they have two choices. One is to come out of the onboard diagnostics of the vehicle directly into the smartphone, in which case it would act just like a traditional taxi meter, but on a smartphone. And then there's another way, which is obviously by GPS, which is the way Uber and Lyft do it. And they've said, look, just because you're a taxi doesn't mean that you can't use their system. So the department, the DFA, or Weights and Measures, they're fully prepared to do this. Now we need cities to say, look, let us do that. Because what does that do? It cuts down another aspect of cost. It's one less hole to drill in a vehicle, right? And gets us closer to being able to have part-time drivers, which is really what we need to meet peak period demand. Any other questions? We never got to the online questions. Okay. Are we good?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.